Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to be the Peripheral Season 1, Episode 7. I feel that regardless of people probably even having mixed feelings about this episode, I feel that a lot of people would, of course, state, but that ending, though. That ending was like, yeah! Like, that episode was like, yeah! Felt good. So, I feel that this episode was easily great. There were a lot of things that they kind of had to cover in one episode that they really could have slowly but surely kind of covered over time. But we had so many episodes with so much dialogue that kind of went nowhere. But it feels that this episode there was even surprises. People died in this episode. So yeah, like this episode was really good. So with that said, what technically happens in this episode, and I have to state that even when I'm going to go on and talk about this episode, kind of teeing it up, I am going to have to be very vague about what I state here, even more so than I have in the past, because there is some things that might be kind of giving away what's going on or what's going to happen in this episode. So, come to find out, we have Ella, who of course is Flynn's mother, that has to go to the hospital in this episode, and Bob seems to be following her. So we also have Constantine in this episode, which I think is actually the best thing about this episode. Hands down. You could state there's so many other interesting things, but no. Constantine's the best thing about this episode, easily. Because we finally get to know who Constantine really is, instead of him just being this kind of detective that's like, well, I want to know what's going on. Instead, we finally figure out who Constantine is and what's going on with Constantine and what side he's on, and by the end of this episode, and I was like, yeah, great. And we also have Ainsley and the Poids coming, like, kind of feeling one another out. And we have Charisse that comes back on this episode and is have some dialogue herself with Ainsley. And it just feels like the whole thing of this episode is everybody's after those Fisher kids. Everybody just wants to like put out an APB or whatever on them, or stop them, or just try to like keep them from doing what they're doing. So yeah, that just gives us some interesting parts about this. So we also have finally something that Lev, interestingly enough, does besides talk to people in this frickin' show. He does something actually interesting. Like, I still feel like this character, I don't know enough about him. But he is willing to kind of do whatever he needs to do to get answers. And we re-tie in that word neoprene again from other episode. So yeah, so whatever neoprene really is, I still don't really get it. But with that said, I think it's about that time to just go on and go into spoilers about this episode. Let me know in the comments below how you feel about this show. Whether you might have mixed feelings, or maybe you're just like, well, hey, if it feels like every other episode is a pretty good episode, maybe I'll check this out. I feel like this episode is the episode to just kind of like, hey, like, you got to go on and kind of deal with the rest of the show, but if you watch this episode, at least it'll be worth it. We could really go on and probably state that like episode 8 might just be a fart in the wind, or might have to go on and do way too much, and then it'll end. So maybe they go on and they just kill everyone off by the end of the last episode, and then we're just like, okay, I guess the show is just ending then, alright. But This episode was freaking great. Check it out. Check this episode out if you already haven't. I apologize if I haven't gotten to this quicker on the draw than I probably should have. Simply because I didn't even realize this was on. So I was trying to get to it as quickly as I could. So with that said, let's go on and double five this bad boy up. Let's just get into spoilers. This show is on Amazon for whatever reason I have to state that for after 7 episodes later. Let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this episode. I want to state that this episode is kind of all over the place, so my spoiler might be all over the place. But I'm going to try to do this the best I can as the way the episode was done. But there's also certain parts of the story that I'm like, I'm more intrigued about this. I want to cover this right away because this is the best part of the show. It really is. So let's get into it. So in the beginning of this episode, we have Ella that states that she is kind of walk around their house and she all of a sudden realizes that she is now blind again. And for Flynn, I think that was the one thing that was to have Flynn help out Wilf and Lev and all those other people. If Ella goes blind again and maybe she gets sick again and maybe even dies, Flynn is probably gonna be like, well, all bets are freaking off. Like I was wanting to help you people. Now, like, I could care less. I was wanting to help you people out in the future. Now, maybe I'm gonna go on and decide to work with Alita West. Maybe I'll go on and even work with Charisse. Maybe. Because it doesn't really seem like you guys are going to help me, so maybe I should figure out another way. Who knows? That's not exactly how this episode breaks down to be. But anyways, it's just the one bargaining chip that Wilf and Lev had is now probably going to, like, backfire on them. So we have Ella that goes on to talk to Reese in his estate. It's like, well, hey, like, I'm going to need to go to the doctor. And the Reese is just like, well, okay, let's go to the doctor. And Ella's like, well, I'm going to need some assistance because I'm blind again. So we have Reese that goes on to take Ella to the hospital. And we have, like, just Bob just kind of waiting in the wings. It's like, well, I'm going to follow her. And maybe she'll lead me to her kids who I have to go on and kill off here. This to me is to almost feel like Terminator in some kind of way. This show is almost Terminator. It's weird. But we also have people from the past going into the future instead of the opposite, where like things are coming from the future going into the past. Anyways, so we then, after that scene, we go to intro after that, and then the next scene we see after that is Ainsley is going on and talking to both Flynn and Lev. Ainsley mentions how Lev has a very beautiful environment, and she kind of compliments Lev, and so we have Ainsley that states that she wants Flynn, Connor, and Burton to all come with her. Like, no exceptions. Like, they're gonna have to come with her. So, we have Ainsley that puts both Connor and both Burton through a simulation with Beatrice, while Ainsley is going to go on and talk to Flynn. So Ainsley is going to go on and ask Flynn a number of questions, but also tell her things about her timeline that is different from Flynn's, because now, since like things have changed from the future coming back to the past, like certain different things have happened, oddly enough. So Ainsley goes on to explain to Flynn that Connor did not have his limbs blown off in her timeline, and also Burton was dead in her timeline. And Flynn is just like, well, okay. So Ainsley starts asking really how much that Flynn knows about the future, and starts to also ask Flynn about, like, well, hey, like, if I, of course, was to go on and state that I had the power to stop all of you Poids from coming to the past, the future, like, how would you feel about that? And Flynn's like, well, like, let me go on and let me ask you questions. And Ainsley's like, okay, like, you have 3 whole questions. Consider me a genie. And I was like, I like this dialogue. I don't remember all of it. I probably won't remember all of it. I won't retain all of it, but still. Um, so Flynn ends up starting to ask questions, but the main one is having Ainsley be asked about, like, well, hey, like, since you just stated about you having the ability to turn on and off whether I can come back here, and you have that power, would you go on and would you stop us from coming back? And Ainsley's like, well, like, here's the thing, like, I told you I would give you 3 questions, but no. So we have Ainsley that turns Flynn off, so that way she goes back to her past, and or goes back to Flynn's technically present time. So both Connor and Burton are going through this simulation, this building. And so Beatrice is to explain to these 2 men that they have to go through every single one of these floors and take all of these people down. And Beatrice also states by the end of this there's going to be a surprise at the end. And Burton's like, well, what kind of surprise is it? And Beatrice is like, well, if I told you anything about the surprise, like, then what's the surprise? So Burton's just like, okay, fine. So Beatrice is a state that by the time of which that these 2 guys have been asking all these questions, anybody else who had known what was already going on could have beaten 3 floors already. So we have Burton and we have Connor who are getting attacked by all these people, and both Burton and Connor take them all down. And so they realize that they realize that the people that they are attacking are all robots. And they also realize that Beatrice is a robot herself. So we go on to have Burton and Connor who start to go through the other floors. And they beat all the other floors and they end up going on to the roof. The surprise at the roof is that Beatrice is going to go on and fight both of them. So the whole time, like, Beatrice had gone on and done analytics and assessments and all kinds of things on both Connor and both Burton, as well as also we would have Ainsley state to Flynn that, like, all of this is just analytics. It's just kind of looking and seeing and feeling these people and getting a real assessment on them, because they just have to, like, Sherlock Holmes these mothers. And just be like, yeah, like, I knew you were gonna do that because, like, I ate a 20% probability that you were going to go on and go that direction, and I was immediately thinking you were going to do that. So we have Beatrice finding Connor and Burton, and what happens is that Beatrice ends up snapping Burton's neck, and when Connor is to need to fight Beatrice, Connor just kind of gives up, realizing that there's no way to win this. And so Beatrice just kicks him off this roof, and he falls to his death and dies. But when Burton and Connor both wake up, we of course have Connor who's like, man, I'm in love with that woman. I'm going to marry that woman, the robot woman. So, plus we still have Connor who is to state that he has legs in the future, and so he's gonna want to live the rest of his life in the future. So he's still making that claim. So now we have Flynn and we have Burton. And I'm kind of going into a lot of this. There's so many other things that I could go into. But let's kind of finish this up. So we have Burton and Flynn find out that Ella is at the hospital. So we have Leon also, or Leon and Connor with Flynn and Burton making their way to this hospital. So we have Dee Dee who is checking on Ella and kind of doing what she can, but then is to have Bob attack Reese. Ella and now Dee Dee are to be in the room with their hands underneath their butts, talking to Bob. So they, like, both Burton and Leon can assess the room, so can Connor, and they can see heat signatures. We also had Connor that was telling Burton that he has night vision, and so he can technically see what's coming. And so when they were doing that sim together. So we have Leon who has to tap into a dead man to kind of have him just kind of jerk around to make him think that he's still dead. And so they're doing that so that way they realize that the guy that is obviously going to be the killer is going to have to move in the room, and Burton is going to fire through the wall to shoot down Bob. So when Bob does move, Burton shoots through the wall and shoots him in the chest. Burton and Flynn go into the hospital, and Dee Dee is trying to like do her doctor duty to try to keep Bob alive. And Burton ends up telling Bob lights out and shoots him and kills him. Shoots him in the head a couple of times. So now Bob is dead. Bob is off the board. So that kind of wraps up that part of the story. So for Flynn and Burton and all that jazz. So we now have Constantine. So Constantine is to go to talk to the evidence woman, who I'm not quite sure if she actually has a name in this episode, or more than likely she might have one, but I don't really see her on the cast list, so I'm going to naturally assume that her name will probably be Gladys. And if it's not Gladys, I really do apologize. So we have this evidence woman that is talking to Constantine, and Constantine is asking whether or not from what Constantine had collected from Bob, if the evidence woman has the gun and the doodad that he took as evidence from Bob, and the evidence woman is like, doodad? Do you mean like whatchamacallit? Like, I guess that's the one thing that we end up having to state when we don't know what something is. So, like, we had also, like, Constantine that tries to compare it to, like, a flashlight, but he has no idea what it was. So, we also have the evidence woman who's talking to Constantine. It's like, shouldn't you be home? Like, I think I should probably call Dee Dee right now to get you home. Because you should be in a dark room somewhere with ice on your head and just kind of trying to, like, sleep this off or try to. And you got a pretty big bump in your head. So, we have Constantine that is to state to this evidence woman, he's like, well, hey, immediately when you tell me the answer to this, I will go on and I will do that. So tell me the answer. So the evidence woman states that the only thing that was brought in was Constantine's car, and that's it. So Constantine goes all the way back to his car in this junkyard. Man, for the life of me, for some reason, there was some other movie where I couldn't state the word junkyard. I couldn't figure out what the word was. But now it just kind of flies out the mouth. It's kind of funny how that works. So, some days you get some words, and then some days you don't. So, it was kind of like defibrillator. Like, defibrillator took me a while to remember what that was. For whatever, like, there were so many reviews where I was like, thing where they just kind of shock people. I don't remember what it's called. Defibrillator. So, we have Constantine that goes to the junkyard, and it's to pull both the gun and the whatchamacallit, the doodad, from his vehicle. It's like, well, okay, alright, like, somebody is to have taken this from evidence and put it right back into this car. So, we have Constantine get these two items, and so Sheriff Jackman is calling Constantine to state that his leave is over, that he needs to get to Corbell's home in a hurry. So Constantine gets to Corbell's house and is to be whipping his gun out and just be all like, kind of like, what's going on? So, if of course we do not remember from the last episode, the each and F off. So we had Corbell that went on, and after he was to go through the sheriff's passwords, we also had Corbell that was telling the sheriff, it's like, well, yeah, you should probably handle that Constantine guy. Handling meaning probably kill him off. So we had Constantine go into Corbell's home and just kind of look around. And so the sheriff is to tell Constantine, it's like, well, hey, everything that happened here has already happened here, so put your gun down. So the sheriff is going on and talking to Constantine and stating that that Corbell's wife Mary was killed by Bob, and so like that's the reason why they are here. And so it seems that Corbell wants to get even with Bob, so because he really like Corbell is a state to the sheriff. It's like, if you can get that guy back here alive, like, I want to deal with him. And the sheriff's like, okay, well, I'll make that so. But anyways, we have the sheriff that just states, like, well, yeah, that's one story, but I'm going to go on and tell you another. So the sheriff is to state that the Fisher kids, which of course is both Flynn and Burton, like, wanted in on Corbell's action. And so they had hired some hitman to try and kill him off. And Constantine is just like, what? Man, that is some tale because none of that makes sense. And so we have Constantine who's just like, it seems like you just made that up. And the sheriff is like, well, look at you, like the guy that seems to be like sleeping easy and you feel like you're squeaky clean, as if like none of the stuff that I've gone on and had you done as like working with me, and like somehow you're to like pretend that all of this stuff is uh to have been the right thing to do when uh you work for me and I work for Corbell, so technically you work for Corbell. So like you're gonna do what I say, whether it makes sense or not. So Constantine is to go into his car and he's starting to get very emotional and he's like smacking his horn and he's very upset because of course he is. So I'm gonna leave it off of that because there's some Charisse and Ainsley stuff that I have to get to, and then we'll get back to what happens with Constantine because I gotta leave a little bit of hanging here, little kind of low fruit. So let's get to that. Let's get to that Ainsley and Charisse stuff. So Ainsley and Beatrice are starting to talk more about what they had learned through talking to these people, and Beatrice is to have assessed that there is something about Connor that is to be so unique compared to Burton. And Ainsley is like, well, why do you say that? And Beatrice is like, I don't know, it's just something within me, like something within my circuits, like telling me that. So it's basically like there's some kind of gut feeling that Beatrice has on Connor that is telling her that it's like, hey, there's something unique about this guy. So we all of a sudden have Charisse come in, and Charisse is to look Beatrice up and down and just be like, okay, like, so you technically have a robot here, but it's not an RI model. And so, like, what other model could this have been? Like, are you, like, having this uh, Coid be, like, a bootleg from some other thing somewhere? So, we have Charisse with Daniel, but Daniel doesn't really do anything. So, Charisse is to assess to Ainsley why exactly that Ainsley had made Patrice. And so Charisse is to assess is like, well, could it be possible that you had maybe lost somebody, maybe even lost a daughter? And Ainsley is to tell Beatrice to shut down, and for the last 5 minutes of their conversation, like wipe it from her memory. And so Beatrice shuts down, and so Ainsley's like, well, why did you say that? Like, why did you do that? And so Ainsley, of course, has a motive. So, oh crap, I also have to get to the Ocean, Lev, and Ash stuff. I really just want to skip all that, but I have to cover it anyways. And then we'll cover uh, the, the Constantine thing. So, I really could care less about the that jibber jabber that they have to go on and all the coded messages, and Lev figures it out. Lev figures it out, the coded message. There's a whole reason why they're doing that coded message, and it leads to Lev asking Ash about the whole coded message thing, and it's stating like, well, hey, you're gonna tell me every bit of secret that you have, because Lev goes on to have his son get this knife. And so Lev is to take out the knife and is to state like which person he would want to leave alive between both Ocean and between both Ash. As they're talking their jibber jabber, and Lev is just like, well, like, for every jibber jabber talk there is like a way to break that code. There is a key to figure out how to break it. There's always like one thing to decipher all of this, and Lev had figured that out. So Lev states that he, between the two of them, like, needs Ash because it seems that she's more valuable than Ocean. So Lev takes a knife to Ocean and is to put it by his chest and to state, I'm going to count to 10 and you're going to tell me what you guys are really planning. So Ash had stated that the eyes of which that the Peripheral had are very unique, and it is to have some information on it that they could use to try and sell to certain factions or certain factors. Faction sounds like a better word. So we have Lev, who's just like, well, who are you going to sell it to? And the first answer that Ash gives, Lev is just like, I don't like that answer. So Lev cuts Ocean in the face, and so Ocean is just kind of holding his face. So, because he slices him like over the cheek. So Lev is like, what's the real answer? And Ash is stating that that they're gonna go on and sell this information to the Neopremes, and Lev is like, okay, all right, well, like, you know what? If you go on and if you lie to me again, like, he's gonna go on and like kill her also. So really, he wants them to, like, you better tell me the truth. So Ainsley is talking to Charisse, and so really there's just a bunch of like gibberish talk about them, like in between, like the main bits of like dialogue that I really cared about Ainsley and Charisse's talking is that Charisse wants Flynn and Burton no more. Like, you go on and put out like an APB on them, like you arrest them, you get rid of them, do whatever you need to do to get rid of them. Or like, I'm gonna go on and spill the beans about Beatrice. So when Charisse leaves, Charisse is mentioning that's like, well, hey, how about you come to my place instead of being here? And then so she walks off. So we, after that, we'll get to the Constantine stuff. I just wanted to rush through the Lev and Ocean and Ash stuff because I just really don't care about it. It's a cool thing that Lev is to give us like that surprise, but I didn't really care about that dialogue. It really meant nothing to me. But so Constantine gets out of his car, goes back into Corbell's home, and so Constantine has that evidence stuff. So Constantine is now to choose a side, and so we have Constantine that is a state to Jackson, the sheriff, that talking about stories, Constantine has a story of his own that Bob had came back to find both Corbell and the sheriff, and so Constantine whips this gun out and starts firing on the sheriff. And I was like, what? Oh my god. So then Constantine has used every single bullet on the sheriff. And now when Corbell starts talking to Constantine, Corbell is like, well, like, I just didn't figure you had the balls or the bullets. And then Constantine realizes that he's all out of bullets. And so Constantine grabs the doodad, and we of course have Corbell, who's like, what is that? And Constantine is like, well, it's a doodad. So he fires it, and Corbell like flings from this glass, and he falls onto the ground, and like we have to assume that he's dead, but I don't feel like he is. Maybe Constantine's gonna tie him up to squeeze all the information he can out of him. Wouldn't that be good? We also had Constantine when he was to get the evidence from his car. We had Constantine that fires that doodad, and he it really impacts him so much that he kind of like backpedals from out of the car because he gets blasted from out of the car because he didn't know what this would do, and so now he knows. So so with that said, I think that goes on to cover most of this episode. Let me know in the comments below if there's anything that I forgot about, any little bit of dialogue. I know that I was kind of half in and half out with the dialogue, but there were bigger events here that were a lot more interesting. So with that said, let me know how you feel about this season so far, or whichever. But I'm going to go on and get out of here, so I can probably go on and get some rest. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, buddy.